Good morning. Today is Friday, February 7th, and welcome to Fault Lines, National Security Institute's podcast that gets you smart fast on the most pressing national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. I'm Martha Miller, and I'm joined today by Morgan Bina and Jessica Jones. Today, we're tackling a highly controversial and fast-moving development, President Donald Trump's proposal for Gaza. His plan envisions relocating Palestinians from the territory while the U.S. oversees reconstruction. Ostensibly aiming to create security, stability, and economic renewal in the wake of war. The administration has characterized these relocations as temporary. Some Israeli officials have described them as voluntary, but yet Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia are pushing back pretty hard and warning that any large-scale population transfer could destabilize the region. Even within Israel, the reaction is mixed. And while some see it as an opportunity to reshape the strategic landscape, others are expressing concern about the diplomatic fallout, security risks, and feasibility. So let's dive in. Morgan, first to you. Does this plan represent a realistic solution? And how will this impact U.S.-Israeli relations and broader Middle East stability?
Martha, I really want to know who I need to reach out to sort of get in early on like some beachfront property in, the Gaza Riviera. Just saying. No, joking. This is a really creative solution. And it's perhaps one that is most befitting of coming from Donald Trump. Look, I think the reality here and this solution proposed by the president reflects that this is a really hard problem. No one wants to take responsibility for Gaza. I mean, the Israelis, following their initial incursion into Gaza, they didn't have a plan for what to do after. Their whole goal was to annihilate Hamas and neutralize any threat to their sovereignty and the security of their country. But at the same time, there's no solution for what governance or governing authority is, what that's going to look like in Gaza. And so as a result of this, I think there's also a problem because none of the other regional Arab countries have a solution either. And so no one wants to take in, 2 million Gazans. When this was proposed to Jordan, the deportation or the relocation of Gazans. I know Jordan declared it a declaration of war. And then Saudi Arabia, is pushing back, and they have not budged from its initial call for a Palestinian state along the borders from 1967. So I think we're kind of in an interesting time here, in that which, while the war in Gaza is sort of in waning, and we have this ceasefire in place, what's next? And so I think that this is where this sort of creative solution came from. At the same time, though, while the war in Gaza is still an important issue, I don't think we should be taking our eye off the ball from the major threat here, and that is Iran and their march towards nuclearization. When Bibi was in town this week, he talked to Trump and the administration about the Iranian threat. My advice to Bibi would have been to say, Mr. President, this is the Iranians are really good negotiators. I know you're a good negotiator too, but I would be really, cautious about entering into any agreement with Iran. They've got a lot of time on their hands, and they're in a really weak position right now. And I think they'll be looking to reestablish their dominance. And at the same time, though, the United States must maintain deterrence in the region and reestablish that, basically because for the past 4 years, we haven't done so under the Biden administration. And so this really is an opportunity to prove to Iran that the United States is back and we're not going to be taking Iran's shit.
So Jess, Morgan mentioned Saudi Arabia, and it's been a key player in regional diplomacy. It's been tied to normalization with Israel. The establishment of a Palestinian state is what the Saudis have been, seem open to. But now with this Trump, with Trump's plan on the table, Riyadh's made it clear that any forced displacement is a red line. So how does this affect U.S.-Saudi relations, and does it does it risk derailing this broader effort to normalize relations between Israel and the Arab world?
Yeah, I think that's a great. I mean, I'm very interested in the Saudi component. We talk about the deal. I mean, I think first, there's a lot of questions on the table, whether it's, like so many announcements that have come from the Trump administration, lingering questions, whether it's permanent resettlement to temporary displacement. We talk about, major reconstruction, to Morgan's point, of the Riviera of the Middle East, but we're not, apparently U.S. taxpayers are not paying for it, nor will we have any troops, though we're keeping that on the table. And while we talk about, a resort in a beautiful land, there's no talk actually of governance, to Morgan's point, right? We're going to have long-term ownership, but there's no talk about actually governing and how that would look like. But to the Saudi part, I find that really fascinating. I think this might be kind of a test case that we should watch when it comes to U.S. leverage and power in the region. Like, I think of MBS and I think of Trump, usually, who are going to be the two most powerful guys in the room, who usually have the upper hand in any transaction, right? And so I think about, if they're coming into the deal, who actually has the upper hand between the two? On the Saudi side, they obviously have, they can impact oil prices. They have obscene amount of money, right? They talked, in their first call, MBS promised $600 billion worth of investment in the U.S. over the next 4 years. Saudi is financing a lot of AI, U.S. technology and innovation companies, AI companies in particular. And they know that the Abraham Accords was, a landmark accomplishment of the first Trump administration. And they know that Israeli-Saudi normalization would also be a huge accomplishment for the Trump administration. On Trump's hand, he knows that Saudi would love a nuclear defense, more nuclear defense cooperation agreement, and we're the United States, usually the biggest hand you can play. And so I'm wondering, though, of course, like, how does that actually play out? And yet, Saudi came out, like you said, very quickly and said that they stand committed to a Palestinian state, which is not in the plans that we hear for the Riviera of the Middle East. They know it would be hugely unpopular with their own population if they supported Trump's current Gaza plan. So I'm really interested to see how that plays out, how strongly, if they come out again, if there's future discussions when it comes to this plan, whether President Trump has to walk back, what he does walk back, if anything. And so I think it's a test case to see, China's influence in the region, how they may play this. They played a part, obviously, in the Saudi-Iran, normalization, and how they've already protested alongside Russia when it comes to Trump's Gaza plan. So I'm interested to see how this plays out in the future and what that may reflect about the U.S.'s power in the region moving forward.
Well, and to that point, also, how does this fit the America First agenda exactly? And, I think, one thing that I've been thinking about is, does this fit the rubric of no more forever wars? Because inevitably this is a conflict rife zone. And if we're talking about the U.S. constructing this, then, and Pete Hegseth said that, essentially all options are on the table. What does that exactly mean?
Yeah.
And, is that what Trump's supporters signed up for? That remains very unclear to me. And I think there are a lot of questions. And I think, kind of like the Greenland and the Panama Canal topics, is this just a conversation starter, a starting point to just force people to take action? What is the true end game that Donald Trump is looking for, or does he even have a clear end game?
Yeah, Martha, you make a really good point, because I think one of the things that, he has energized people to do is actually think about solutions here and think about how to get things done. It's a motivator, right? By throwing out this sort of seemingly, outlandish, out of the box solution to Gaza, he's actually forced people to start thinking about, like, oh, yeah, right, we actually have to get this done, or we might actually do it. But no, I mean, I think it's really interesting to Jessica's point about how this is going to affect normalization, particularly with Saudi Arabia. Yeah. Saudi Arabia is in a really great position right now, particularly with an Iran that has been humbled. Thank you very much, Israel, in recent months. And so I think Trump has a huge opportunity here to really sort of reshape what that relationship with Saudi Arabia looks like, and more specifically, what the relationship between Saudi Arabia and Israel look like. right now, I think we are in the very, very nascent early stages of what any sort of negotiation might look like. And so
Mhm.
people are just like throwing their positions out there.
Yeah.
But I think if anything, Trump's comments have been a really great motivator for getting people to talk about this issue and coming to the table.
Well, stay tuned to Fault Lines because we will have more discussions about this topic, I'm sure, including Iran and what the Trump administration's approach is to Iran. And, maybe just to preview, perhaps even comparing it to JCPOA and other ideas that have been on the table for the United States. Well, that's a wrap. Thank you to the NSI team, Kelly Crowley, and also to Claude Jennings for the help producing today's episode. Join us on Monday, February 10th, for another full episode of Fault Lines, NSI's podcast that gets you smart fast on the national security and foreign policy debates shaking up America. Find us on YouTube so you can see our beautiful faces and rate, review, and subscribe.